Hey again, my friends. Had so much fun, I thought I'd do this again. So, quick follow-up to the video from a little earlier. Where exactly did, or what gave birth to Maslow? What is Maslow's ideology, Maslow's approach to doing things? Maslow fits in the greater theoretical perspective known as humanism. To understand humanism, we have to go back a few generations. So in terms of psychological theories, or at least psychology's approach to understanding human behavior, we need to go back to the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, and there are two prongs. There's the European approach, and then there's what was going on in North America at that time. In Europe, you had Freud and his colleagues, who were MDs, admittedly, but they were also, and psychiatrists with middling success, and they were investigating the idea, or at least finding out, that a fair number of their female patients had been physically and sexually abused since childhood by the men in their lives. Big freaking surprise there. It didn't just happen in Europe 100 years ago. Freud didn't just come up with these ideas out of nowhere. That's another video, though. So you had a birth of intellectual thought being bought out of this recognition of gender-based violence and trauma. There was another form of trauma on this side that led to a slightly different approach to thinking about what shapes our mind and how we interact with one another. And that was the Reconstruction after the Civil War. One of my favorite books, one of my prized books, William James. And if you go back and read his on psychology, William James, his basic book, I mean, it's wonderful. So, following the Civil War, not a person in the U.S. Was left untouched. There wasn't a man, woman, child who wasn't left with the pain of losing someone. And what William James and other intellectuals at the time became fascinated with is this idea of the afterlife. And could they provide scientific evidence with the best available tools at the time for the existence of the afterlife? And that led to the birth of an intellectual movement which set the foundation for contemporary psychology in North America as we see it. European psychologists, because of the nastiness of World War I, World War II, came over to North America. Their ideas came with them. And Freud hit, like, for lack of a better metaphor, a nuclear bomb, and had a huge devastating effect in intellectual thought here in North America and worldwide, and we still feel his impact. What was born out of the backlash against Freud and his psychosexual theories, there were psychosocial theories, one of his students, Erickson. So certainly what was born out of that was a school of thought called behaviorism, which is, okay, let's get out of the mind. Let's kind of go back to basic science, and let's have an input. That input impinges itself upon an object, and we'll observe an output. Strict behaviorism. That led to operant conditioning, classical conditioning, which led to social learning. And we'll get to that in a minute. But for a good 30, 40, 50 years, this idea of a behavioral, scientific-based, data-driven approach to studying human behavior was dominant in North American psychology. That brings us up to the mid-60s, early 70s, and the birth of the school of intellectual thinking that where we place Maslow. And he is part of what's called the humanists. And the humanists railed against science. They did not think it was valuable. They did not think it gave a valid approach to seeing behavior, and neither did us empiricists. We never said it was the be-all and end-all. We just said it was one of many valid approaches to studying human behavior. So the humanists, very anti-theoretical. The humanists wanted to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They had no interest in studying science and having a science-based psychology as a discipline. And that is where Maslow was born out of. And the humanists, as a school of intellectual thought in psychology, continue to exist today. And they are largely atheoretical. Well, they're not atheoretical, they put out their theories, but they're ascientific and are not particularly gung-ho on the value of data and data-driven science as an approach to examining human behavior. So with that in mind, I will see you again. Ciao, mi lovelies.